It is time for the long-form FIR episode for August 2026, and we have brought the goods. In this episode, an expert witness used ChatGPT to write a report, and all his prompts found their way into evidence. We'll let you know the impact that had on 3M, the company that hired the witness. More than 10 years ago, Nutrogena parted way with a celebrity spokesperson citing a violation of its morals clause. Now that celebrity is dead, and Nutrogena is facing a crisis with real bottom-line consequences. Because Reddit is so often cited as a source for AI answers, brands have suddenly taken an interest in Reddit without taking the time to figure out what works there and what doesn't. And if you haven't seen a subreddit community get up in arms, it is something to behold. The court case playing out in Oakland right now could force Meta to scrap a lot of the features that make its social media platforms desirable, changing social media as we know it. One company is manually reviewing 4,000 job applications because an AI tool may have blatantly discriminated against some of those candidates. And there are brands adding employees to their ranks of paid content creators, but did they understand all the legal and labor issues that would raise? All that and Dan York's Tech Report are coming your way right now on For Immediate Release. Another fine podcast from the FIR Podcast Network.
This is For Immediate Release, the podcast for communicators.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the For Immediate Release podcast, long-form episode 527 for August 2026. I'm Neville Hobson.
And I'm Shel Holtz. And Neville, you're back in your office. It's good to see you back there again. It must mean that the heat wave has broken there in the UK.
Yeah, it has. I'm enjoying a temperature of the low 20s in here with the air conditioning on. It's very nice and beats what we've had with 30 plus upwards. Not good. But it's been an interesting few weeks in a number of levels. One of the highlights, in fact, the big highlight, was the fact that when Laura and I and our grandkids and my daughter were visiting California at the beginning of August in Novato in Marin County, we met for lunch. We came into the city and you and I and the whole crew got together and we had a phenomenal time at that lunch, didn't we?
Yeah, we did at the Water Bar, right on the waterfront on Embarcadero, overlooking the Bay Bridge. And it was fun to be able to have you sitting there, this wonderful building, and to say, we built this, because the company I work for built the structure that the Water Bar is in and the steakhouse next to it, that whole complex. So that was fun, even though that was before my time that we built that. But it was great to see you and Laura. It had been since 2019.
A while.
And it was just delightful to meet your daughter after having heard about her for so many years, and to meet your wonderful granddaughters. They're terrific.
Yeah. Well, you made a big impression on them because they talked about you a lot afterwards, but it was good. I mean, as we both said, in real life, face to face, can't beat it. But this is the next best thing on video. So it was great catching up and enjoying a delightful lunch over a few hours. The wine was super that we had. It was Californian wine, if I'm not wrong, Shel.
Stag's Leap, if I remember correctly.
Okay, no Spanish Rioja there. So that's good. And we did enjoy our week overall, even though some of the circumstances weren't quite as we had originally planned it. But it was good to, from my point of view, certainly, where a change is as good as a rest. So a change of scene. Coming over there, I found extremely beneficial to recovering from some of the health problems that I've been having prior to that. So enjoyed it a lot, Shel, and we got to do it again soon, I hope.
Yeah, Michelle and I were talking about the fact that we need to get back over to the UK. So it won't be next year. We already have our vacation next year plotted out, but maybe 2028 we'll cross the pond and come see you.
Okay, we'll make
not been to Somerset,
note.
So need to make that journey.
Yeah, this is quite something to experience for Somerset. There's a lot. Yeah, I look forward to that. If we can swing it, it'd be great.
But we're not going to talk about personal stuff for the entire show. We will
No.
be talking about stories in the news that have a connection to organizational communication and technology. We hope that one of them at least sparks a comment from you, listeners. And there are a number of ways that you can comment on this show. The first is to just leave a comment in the comment field in the show notes at the FIR website, firpodcastnetwork.com. You can also leave that comment on the post where we share updates on episodes that we have published. LinkedIn, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, we share on all of them, and you can leave a comment there. We check those for your comments. You can send an email to fircomments@gmail.com and attach up to a 2-minute audio file. If you would like us to play it, we would be happy to. You can even record that. No fuss, no muss, right there on the FIR website. We use a service called SpeakPipe. It has a tab on the right-hand side of the page. It says send voicemail. Click and record, and I'll get that. There's also the FIR community on Facebook where you can not only leave a comment, but engage with other listeners. And lots of ways that you can share your comments and become part of the show and drive the content. We have some comments in this episode to share with you. Also, your reviews are very much appreciated wherever you have the opportunity to rate and review podcasts. That's a great way for others to discover FIR.
Let's begin with a recap of the episodes we've published over the past month and some listener comments. In the long-form episode 523 for July, published on the 27th of July, you shall reported on rethinking thought leadership, maintaining brand sovereignty in the AI era, and whether hedging in your communication can serve a useful purpose. In FIR 524 on the 3rd of August, you addressed the topic of whether managers are ready to lead an AI-fluent workforce or not. Too many indicators suggest they're not. The subject of work slop was our topic in FIR 525 on the 12th of August, with mounting evidence that it can create long-term problems for companies. We discuss the latest research and share our thoughts on what businesses can do about it. And we have one comment.
Yeah, from Mike Klein, who said, of course, organizations have been clocking externalities as productivity gains since the time they started clocking anything at all.
Okay. In FIR 526, we added our thoughts to the growing debate about Anthropic's new watermark feature that's rolling out on Claude. That episode was published just last week, actually. We discussed one firm's new AI writing policy and its 4 guiding principles for employees, which make far more sense to us than trying to detect a watermark. And we have some comments on this one.
Yeah, Susie Erjovic-Parker wrote that this will never apply to me as a professional communicator because my writing is mine and mine alone. I don't outsource any of it to a technology destined to destroy the environment, our water resources, and the creative process of humanity. Here's to everyone saying no to this nonsense. And Ike Piggott, in a reply to Susie, said, let me search online and see if someone has written the thing I want so I can copy it, is plagiarism. Yet for the AI evangelists, let me ask for a smoothie blend of hundreds of plagiarized documents is somehow fine. Feels like idiocracy is nigh. And Patrick Coyle, in an independent comment, said, no, we should definitely be asking, did you use AI to write this? So a lot of people continue to object to this at a fundamental level.
Yeah, you're right. I noticed that myself even. So the debate will continue, in my view, the wrong topic to be debating. Doesn't carry the same importance or weight as the one people should be talking about, which is the content that is produced, guidance on how to do it well and do it right. So, this debate will continue for quite a while, I'd say. So, now you're up to date on FIR episodes.
Great. Now let me bring you up to date on Circle of Fellows episodes. This is the monthly panel discussion featuring fellows of the International Association of Business Communicators. I usually moderate these, and when I'm not available, Brad Whitworth does that. We have published episode number 131. This is a monthly program, so you can imagine how long this has been going on to get 131 of them out there. This was on the evolving media landscape and what it means for media relations. The fact that so many journalists are starting their own media companies with Substacks and YouTube channels, and the like, and what does this do to pitching and the notion of reaching out to reporters in order to get coverage, because the audiences that these media companies have is much smaller than the mainstream media. So it was a great conversation with Diana Deegan, Ned Lundquist, Martha Muzichka, and Jennifer Waugh. The next episode is the first of a two-parter, and it is coming this Thursday. And it will feature Adrian Cropley, Bonnie Caver, Theomary Karamanis, and Mike Klein. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and the leadership moment for the communications profession. So should be a good, robust discussion. And as I say, we're doing that in two parts. There will be 4 different fellows picking up part 2 of this in September.
So our first story is an interesting one, I find. 3 people died, around 200 homes were destroyed, and millions of dollars were at stake. And an expert witness hired by 3M to help defend the company in the resulting litigation turned to ChatGPT to help write his expert report. That alone might raise questions, but it isn't really the extraordinary part of the story. According to reporting by 404 Media, the expert, Josh Autenreith, told ChatGPT that he had been retained by 3M and asked it to help him create an exceptional expert witness report defending the standard of care at 3M. More remarkably, he instructed it to show how 3M is 0% at fault for the explosion. In other words, this wasn't, here is the evidence, help me analyze it and determine what happened. It was much closer to, here is the conclusion, help me build the argument that supports it. And we know this because his ChatGPT conversations became part of the legal discovery process. The prompts reveal something else rather astonishing. Autenreith reportedly has about 20 years' experience in gas detection. Yet at one point, he uploaded a photograph of a gas detector to ChatGPT and asked, "What am I looking at?" According to one of the plaintiff's lawyers, that detector was central to the entire case. There are obvious questions here about professional standards, disclosure, and the appropriate use of generative AI in expert testimony. But I think there's a bigger question for organizations. AI can make it extraordinarily easy to construct a persuasive argument for something you've already decided to believe. Give it enough documents, tell it the conclusion you want, and ask it to assemble the strongest case. That's not necessarily analysis. It can be automated confirmation bias. And if organizations increasingly use AI to support decisions, strategies, investigations, and recommendations, how do we distinguish between using AI to help us discover what the evidence says and using it to manufacture a convincing justification for what we already want the answer to be? And one more thought. If your AI conversations might eventually be discoverable, perhaps we should start thinking about prompts not simply as instructions to a machine, but as records of our reasoning. There's an awful lot to unpack here, Shell, it seems to me.
There certainly is. And at its core, this is a governance story. I don't know if this expert witness was an independent contractor or if he worked for somebody, but at some level, you need to have that governance that gives you the rules about how to use this and what you are going to retain. I mean, this is why legal needs to play a part in that whole governance conversation, is because they understand the rules of discovery from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, and they understand what kind of challenges can arise when in a lawsuit, the other party has access to all of those prompts, all of those conversations that you've had with a large language model. So you need to have governance around this to begin with. The other issue that leaps to mind is that output could be 3 pages of highly polished slop that doesn't stand up to scrutiny, but because it answered the question he set out to have it answer, he's perfectly happy with it. I wonder if he challenged it at all. Did he put it through any kind of a red team? I spent days creating a communications red team skill in ChatGPT. And I can run anything through this. I can run a detailed communication strategy through it. I can run a 3-paragraph email we're sending out on behalf of the CEO through this, and it puts it through all of these various levels in order to challenge what I'm saying here. What's a fact and what's an assumption? How are different audiences within the organization likely to react to this, and so on and so forth? So I think, first of all, front loading the outcome that you're looking for is dangerous enough. Leaving that paper trail there for a belligerent legal team to find is another level of bad. But then just assuming that the output is perfect and relying on that without putting it through some kind of challenge, I think is dangerous. I think this was a disaster waiting to happen from the get-go.
Yeah. The thing I find extraordinary, frankly, is did anybody at the client check any of this? Was there a human client in the loop? I wonder. There's something else too to mention, that the Futurism also reported on this, as well as 404 Media. They reported that over 350 pages of ChatGPT activity were turned over in the discovery process. And I'm thinking to myself, what this suggests to me, apart from the obvious things, is that this was someone who didn't quite understand how ChatGPT works in terms of what it retains, how it retains it. And the other side did. So when they did the discovery, they knew what to look for and how to ask for it. So it still comes back to probably the legal team at 3M. Did they not rehearse this? Did they not know what this expert witness was going to be asking or going to be presenting? From reading the 404 Media report, this all came out during the presentation by the expert witness in the lawsuit. So it came unknown to anyone. I mean, goodness me, that's no way to run a defense in a lawsuit of this magnitude, it seems to me. So I'm surprised it's not got more coverage than it has, actually. But it is extraordinary that this actually happened, it seems to me.
Yeah, I'm not surprised it hasn't gotten more attention, because it's, oh my God, another law story where somebody used ChatGPT and it bit them in the ass. We hear those pretty frequently. The difference here, though, is that it's expert witness testimony.
Right.
And how discovery played a part that I think should get people to pay attention to this. And, why would 3M not dig into it deeper? I can imagine, I'm just making this up, I don't know if this is true, but I can imagine, you've worked with an expert witness for decades. They're great. They have helped you win multiple cases. And now this person has discovered ChatGPT. You don't know this as the legal team. You've been working with this guy for years. He's been fine. So you just accept the outputs that he produces based on that experience and the trust that has built up. The only difference being now he's made life easier for himself by employing a large language model. And there the trouble begins. So I think we're going to need to start needing to ask for disclosure from people that we have worked with a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, we've been working together since before there was generative artificial intelligence. Are you using it? How are you using it? Let's go over this to make sure that we're covered. I think you're going to need to ask that of pretty much every supplier these days.
I totally agree with that, Sean. I think it hasn't happened. Obviously, they didn't ask any of those questions. So you've got a kind of fault, if you will, at the client for not asking those kinds of questions. Maybe it's a comfort thing that everything's fine. I mean, we don't need to worry about this. But you've raised the point quite well, I think, that the time has arrived now where you need to audit everything. You need to be clear in your mind. So you've got to go through the what if. You've got to, what could happen if that will guide you in terms of what you need to do with the people you do business with or who you hire to help you do something such as an expert witness in a lawsuit, where the consequences are not minor at all, the outcome of this if it goes against you. And use an expert witness who is great because you worked with him before, but is completely current with the right way of doing all this. Is an ethical issue here too. So that's something I think you need to add to your to-do list to make sure that you are clear with the people you've hired to work with you, that they are on board with the right way to do this. That may well come into play in terms of your own policies about third parties working for you as contractors or some other manner, that how they use AI needs to be declared. And you also then, the obvious, you need to put in place the checks and balances that the human in the loop activity we've talked about a lot on this show.
Yes, a vendor AI audit is a new requirement. Let's inventory all the vendors we work with and check on their AI practices. I mean, what if you work with a freelance writer to supplement your own staff's ability to crank out copy? You've been working with them for years. They've only recently started using AI. They need to disclose to you how they're doing that so that you know what you need to be looking for when you're reviewing their content.
Yeah. Boy, this
What it
opens
comes
up an eyebrow raising area, it seems to me, because I wouldn't be surprised to learn that hardly anyone's doing that.
Oh, I would be surprised if I surveyed 20 communicators, if I found one whose organization was auditing all of their suppliers and vendors for AI practices, that would surprise me. I don't think this is one that has seen the light of day yet in terms of general awareness.
I agree.
Yep. Well, Nutrogena is in a genuine crisis right now, the kind of almost impossible to game out in a tabletop exercise because it didn't start with anything the company did, yesterday or this week. It started with something that has been on the record for some time, discoverable with a 2-minute search. It's been up there for more than a decade. You may have known Hayden Panetierre from a TV series called Heroes. I didn't. I guess I'm culturally illiterate, or maybe I'm just old. You're not a
Gen Z shell. That's the point.
That's a problem. I think I'm glad I'm not. I hope I just didn't offend all the Gen Zers in our audience. But my daughter had posted an RIP to Hayden on Instagram. So as I was reading about all of this with Nutrogena, I had to reach out to my daughter and say, okay, tell me who this person was. One thing she was, though, was the face of Nutrogena, the spokesperson for about 10 years, from 2005 to 2015. Not long after she gave birth to her daughter, she went on live with Kelly and Michael and talked openly about her postpartum depression. Panetierre said that that's what got her dropped by Nutrogena. They said that they viewed her disclosure of her postpartum depression as a violation of their morals clause in their contract. She told the story again this past May while promoting her memoir, generating some mild but manageable backlash at the time. Then she died on August 16th at the age of 36. She was found unresponsive at a residence in Greenville, South Carolina. There were no signs of trauma, no signs of foul play. The cause of death, last I checked, was still pending, although there are indications of some kind of overdose. The internet, though, went straight back to that interview, and within days, the phrase Nutrogena boycott was trending, and the stock of its parent company, Kenvue, used to be a Johnson & Johnson unit, took a real but not necessarily a substantial hit. But for 4 days, Nutrogena didn't say anything. And this is interesting because they responded within hours to an unrelated advertising flap involving Tate McRae. And no, I don't know who he is either. Shameful, I know. But the point is that this wasn't a company that doesn't know how to move fast. It just chose not to on this one topic where speed and empathy probably mattered most. And by the way, postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis are front and center in the news right now with the trial of Lindsay Clancy making headline news. She's the former nurse who killed her 3 children, then tried to kill herself, paralyzing herself in the process. She sought help for a rapidly worsening postpartum mental health crisis, and the system failed to identify and treat the psychosis that ultimately overwhelmed her. And of course, society here in the U.S. is kind of polarized over this case. But with that going on, Nutrogena should have been able to see how its firing of this celebrity back in 2015 might have sparked renewed attention. Anyway, this past Thursday, Nutrogena finally posted a statement on Instagram. They were deeply saddened. They were proud to have partnered with her. And the line getting the most attention, we understand that we made her feel unsupported during a very difficult time. And then they promised a significant investment to a postpartum support health partner. Details to come. And notably, they turned off comments on the post itself. So what do crisis professionals make of all of this? Molly McPherson of NBC News said that it isn't a press release problem, it's an action problem. The company faced one of these unknowns in crisis management, but still could have planned to be empathetic. It cost Nutrogena 4 days of the narrative being written entirely by other people. 2 LinkedIn reactions from communicators get at exactly what's wrong with the response. Jerry Corbett, former chair and CEO of PRSA and now CEO of Red Flag, and a past guest on FIR, wrote for Strategic Magazine the day before Nutrogena broke its silence that a corporate crisis does not always begin with a new event. Sometimes an old decision returns under circumstances that give it new meaning. His point was that the silence itself became the story. And Erica Cardina, a PR manager, went further on LinkedIn. Her critique, the moment to acknowledge this was in May, when she was still there to receive that acknowledgement. We were proud to partner with her rings pretty hollow given why the partnership reportedly ended. And we understand why we made her feel unsupported is corporate cushioning. Her suggested fix, just say we failed to support her because that's what it was. Then there's the comments being switched off. And as Erica put it, you can't publish a statement about accountability and immediately shut the door on the conversation. By August, she argued it read less like accountability and more like a brand trying to contain damage. And people can tell the difference. Communicator Lacey Haynes, commenting on Jerry Corbett's post, raised a related gap. The donation pledge is easy money unless it's a really substantial amount and backed by real executive commitment. And what would actually reassure people is a stated policy on how Nutrogena will support its spokespeople going forward, not just a one-time gesture because of something we did in the past. So what's the lesson for us? Real quickly, 3 things. 1, your discoverable history is your risk profile. Assume anything a public figure has said about your brand anywhere at any time is going to resurface at the worst possible moment, and plan for it before that moment arrives. 2, silence is never neutral, and neither is turning off comments on the statement meant to address it. Both say we're managing this and not we're listening. And 3, soft language reads as evasion. If your statement needs a phrase like, we understand we made someone feel X, ask whether the plain version, we failed her, is the one you're actually avoiding and why you're avoiding it.
Yeah, it's a very sad tale itself, but these revelations about Neutrogena and going back just over a decade to what they did to literally get rid of her, how they reacted at that time, and then now all this has come out and the lack of response. So they are in trouble in the court of public opinion without any doubt. Cynics would argue, does it all blow over? Does it really matter? Well, yes, it does matter. If you're a publicly listed company in particular, it could affect your stock price, which you notice the parent company has taken the hit. But it will have a negative effect on people's perception of you and your brands when they're out in the pharmacy or wherever buying products, and they'll recall this. Perhaps if they're fans, they definitely will have a negative reaction to you. So I just found it extraordinary. Some of the things you said, Shell, such as publish what they did and then turn off all the comments. There's one of the reports I read, I think it's in the Independent newspaper, talked about posts on Reddit that have attracted thousands of responses and likes and so forth and upvotes, all that. That's there for all to see for time immemorial, I would say. And they're not part of the conversation. So I'm not going to try and second guess what they might have done in crisis communication planning, except to say it doesn't look they had a plan ready for this eventuality.
Yeah, we say this pretty much every time we do a crisis communication story about a company that blew it. We ask, was a communicator in the room when any of these decisions were made? Did they just choose to not listen? But to those who would say that this will all just blow over, and we hear this a lot, is, all crises are transient in nature. Well, remember, this is now part of your permanent record too. So in 5 years, when Nutrogena gets into some sort of a dust up with another spokesperson or an influencer or a creator that they're paying, people are going to remember this. And if they don't remember, they're going to do a quick search and they're going to find it. And it's going to re-emerge and just add fuel to the fire. You see, they did this before to this woman, and they bought everybody off by making a contribution to a nonprofit that deals with postpartum issues, and then they went along their merry way, and now they've abused another person that they had on their payroll because they didn't change their policy to how they treat their spokespeople when they went through this before. So it's just waiting to happen again.
Yeah, I just performed a completely unscientific experiment. I just opened up Google and typed in Nutrogena. We've got sponsored results is the first item that appears in Chrome from Nutrogena. Explore our ranges, it says, and a link to something provided skincare results. Then the very next thing is Nutrogena responds to backlash after Hayden Panetierre dies. And then there's links galore to media stories about this. And that's just entering the word Nutrogena. And beyond that, it's got a link the way Google's now doing all this. More news, you click on that and you get pages of this stuff. Then further down, if you scroll, you'll then start seeing links to some of their products. But if you land on the page and the first thing you see is what happened with this woman and how they dealt with it, you're likely to kind of explore that a bit, I suspect. Not a good look for them at all.
No, it's not. It's a classic crisis communication. Is it existential for Neutrogena? Probably not. But I can see that particularly among this actress's fan base, there are probably people who are simply going to switch to a competitor's product and be done with Neutrogena at this point. So you're gonna lose some faith with some of your existing fans. You're gonna lose trust, and you've pretty much established an approach that you've taken to this sort of thing that I think is underwhelming and unsatisfactory for a lot of people who are looking for more from an organization like this.
Yeah, I agree. So the obvious question I'd ask you is, if you were advising Neutrogena, what would you advise them to do now?
Well, now it's all reactive, and this is after the proverbial horse has left the proverbial barn. But at this point, I would come right out and say our previous statement was inadequate. We take full responsibility for our actions. We should not have. Clearly, somebody suffering postpartum depression is not a violation of a morals clause. That was inappropriate. Here is what we are doing by way of our policies with spokespeople going forward to make sure that we treat our spokespeople fairly in the future. And this is what we are doing in order to support people who are suffering through postpartum issues and challenges, because we want to play a part in this in order to try to make up for our transgressions thus far.
So Neutrogena, if you're listening, there's some good advice there for you.
Yeah, they're listening.
Well, I mentioned Reddit in that story, and that's the heart of our next story, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal. So 20 years ago, when companies were first trying to figure out social media, we used to give them some fairly simple advice. Don't walk into somebody else's community and immediately start talking about yourself. Listen first, learn the culture, understand why people are there, and if you eventually join the conversation, contribute something useful. That holds true today as it did 20 odd years ago. But apparently we're having to learn all that again, it seems to me, because marketers have suddenly fallen in love with Reddit, according to the journal. And there's a very particular reason why. According to the journal's report, Reddit has gone from being something of an afterthought in many companies' digital strategies to one of the places marketers desperately want their brands to appear. We've talked about this a number of times on FIR over the past year, the rise of Reddit as literally a number one place to see discussions about you and your brand. It's interesting what the journal says, and the reason for it is not simply because consumers use Reddit, but because AI does. Reddit conversations turn up extensively in the material that AI systems use to answer questions. So if somebody asks ChatGPT or Claude which running shoes to buy, which software to use, or whether a particular company is trustworthy, what people have been saying on Reddit could help shape the answer. Naturally enough, marketers have spotted that opportunity. Unfortunately for them, Redditors have spotted it too. When jewelry company Brilliant Earth advertised for a Reddit strategy manager whose job included shaping conversations that would cascade across search engines, LLMs, and customer decision-making, moderators of the jewelry subreddit immediately raised the alarm. One described Reddit as possibly the very last place on the internet for genuine company reviews and feedback. And that gets to the fascinating contradiction here. The more valuable, authentic human conversation becomes to AI, the greater the commercial incentive to manipulate that conversation. And the more brands try to manipulate it, the less authentic and therefore potentially less valuable it becomes. Some marketers are already approaching Reddit exactly as you might fear. So those old behaviors have never, ever gone away. The journal found agencies operating brands dozens of Reddit mentions every month, using accounts that appear to be legitimate community members and even promising services involving negative comments. But some companies have discovered another approach. Don't market. Audio equipment manufacturer Sonos built goodwill by having an identifiable company representative help people with technical problems and translate corporate announcements into ordinary language. There in itself, by the way, is a lesson for communicators. How about trying to communicate in the first place in ordinary language? So investment solutions and services firm Fidelity created communities around useful financial discussion and information. And Reddit itself says brands should arrive with three things: utility, humility, and respect, which sounds remarkably like the advice we were giving companies at the beginning of social media over 20 years ago. There's an AI story here, certainly. There's a marketing story. There's also a communication story about authenticity, community, and trust. But as AI makes genuine human conversation increasingly valuable as a source of information, are we about to see an escalating contest between the people creating those conversations and the organizations trying to influence what those conversations tell the machines? And if marketers succeed too well, do they ultimately destroy the very thing they're trying to exploit? Welcome back to social media circa 2006.
Yeah, which is exactly the same as social media 20 years ago in terms of what organizations should be doing. Of course, what organizations should be doing and what they do frequently are misaligned. But every couple of years, we report on a story that leads me to invoke Christopher Barger and the time that he spent at General Motors running their social media team. Because if anybody understood how to do this well, it was Christopher. And this was long enough ago that social media was basically the blogosphere. This predates all the social networks. But what Chris did was he had members of his team assigned to the various car blogs that wielded a certain amount of influence. I remember Jalopnik was one of these. There were several of them. But the instructions they had were very clear. He says, you're not parachuting in from GM. I'm here to help. I'm going to tell you why you're wrong with what you just said about one of our vehicles. Their role was first to listen, second to participate in conversations where they had expertise that had nothing to do with General Motors, just be a member of the community and participate and build the connection with the other people in the community. And when GM comes up at that point, you're already known, you're trusted, you're not the spokesperson from GM, you're Bob, right? And now you can comment and people are going to listen to you because you are on equal footing with other members of that community. That's the way to do this. Dell was another great example. They had that, you remember that listening center. I don't know if anybody still has these, but those high-tech, futuristic, mission control like social media listening centers would use an algorithm to surface discussions that were taken to the appropriate department in the organization for action. And then the person who was in that community would be able to solicit more information, then come back and say, okay, we've listened to you. There was one particular case where there was a lot of discussion about why this particular Dell laptop cost so much more than a different model, when the only difference was that it had been loaded with bloatware. And they took it to the team that was the product management team for that particular product, and they looked at the argument. They said, you know what, they've got a point. And so they dropped the price, and they were able to go into the community and say, well, thank you for this conversation. It's been really enlightening. You're absolutely right. And we're taking action. We're lowering the price. How do you imagine the community reacted to that? I mean, 100% positively. So there is a way to engage in these communities. Should your organization be on Reddit? I don't know. Is your community on Reddit? Are your fans on Reddit? Are your customers on Reddit, or other stakeholders or thought leaders and influencers? Is there a good strategic reason to be there with your brand or your organization? Maybe. Should you be there just for the GEO? I don't think so. And in fact, this was just in the news. From July 18th through August 7th of this year, Reddit accounted for an average of 3.83% of ChatGPT search citations. By August 14th, that had fallen below 1%, averaging just 0.52% through this past Monday. That's an 86.4% drop. So according to the Axios piece where I read this, they're suggesting that you shouldn't pin all your GEO hopes on one mythical unicorn. Now, who called it a mythical unicorn? Our friend Steve Rubel, who is an executive vice president for media insights and measurement at Burson these days. That mythical unicorn, he says, doesn't exist. It's a long game, and brands need to be engaged on many different channels. Some will go up, some will go down based on citations. But doing yourself reputational damage by misbehaving in a social network just because you think that's where your citations in AI results are going to come from, man, that's just dumb.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, if you're not already on Reddit or another place that's relevant to where conversations are happening about your brand, that's relevant to you, it's going to present you with a huge hill to climb to establish a credible presence now. I've already seen some examples. I'm not going to mention any names of companies who are doing this, going about this utterly the wrong way, doing literally what you said not to do earlier. Hey, I'm here from X company, not X, but company X or whatever. Let me know what's bothering you, and I'll try and help. That kind of thing. Whereas it would be better if you are Bob from X, who's got a passion and a strong interest in whatever the topic might be, that's relevant to that community, joins that community and doesn't do anything for 3 months except listen to what people are saying, might like something or upvote something, and he's already filled out a comprehensive profile describing himself, where the focus is on him and his passion, not him and who he works for. And it's kind of like, by the way, I work for so-and-so, but this is just me here. Either way, that was what I would recommend to anybody. And with the caveat, it's going to be hard work to establish a presence now if you haven't already done one. And if it's kind of not perceived to be the kind of behavior you would expect from your company, your work is even harder in that case. But flip it over and say it's never too late. Indeed, better too late than never. So I would say, this is worth listening to what these examples show and look back at 2006 and see what people are doing and join the conversation the right way.
Yeah, the other example that we can take from back in the Jurassic era of social media would be Frank Eliason and the Comcast Cares account on Twitter.
Yep.
Where they were actively searching for people complaining about Comcast, and then not going in to tell them they're wrong, but going in to tell them, let me see if I can help you with that. Some people were a little creeped out, oh, you're monitoring me. But most people were delighted that somebody was being proactive, not waiting for me to pick up the phone and deal with the labyrinth of customer support, and instead reaching out when you've identified that I'm having a problem with a solution. I think most people were very grateful for that.
I agree. So there's lessons to be learned here from just 20 years ago, but even that, this isn't like was invented 20 years ago. This has been since the days of forums, that this was good behavior to exhibit on those old forums that were control freakery writ large, those forums. But if you were there, as Bob from Company X, hey, chatting with people about the things they're interested in, you would have stood good stead in building relationships. So the mediums may have changed, and social attitudes certainly have changed. But these fundamentals of listening, getting to understand people's issues, making an effort to come across as genuinely interested in helping them, will stand you in good stead no matter what.
Good day, Shell and Neville. It's Dan York coming at you from Brisbane, Australia, where I've been for the past week for some work for the Internet Society. I'm heading home tomorrow, but before I do that, let me send in this quick report. One was, there was an article in Design Rush on July 28th saying, publisher traffic falls 33% globally as AI overviews reshape search. It actually is an article that goes through a lot of data from various different sources, looking at the changes and brings together a lot of different research over the past while about the changes that have been happening. One of the ones was an article actually from back in June by Rand Fishkin over on the Spark Toro site, which talks about how in 2026, what happens after a Google search, 32%, and only that, so about a third, actually click on something. The other 68% do either nothing or they do another search or something. But the main point is that most stuff is now going through AI overviews, or it's happening through other LLMs directly. Some of the charts, some of the pieces show that small publishers, search referral traffic was down 60%. Mid-sized publishers down 47%. Large publishers down 22%. This was Chartbeat data. So again, pointing out that we're in a different world now. I was just at a meeting, or a couple of meetings here this week, and talking to people. Most of them use ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity for their main searches. They're not using Google as much anymore at all. Which leads to the second story I wanted to talk about, which is that Time started to try to put ads for AI agents. What they've actually done, and I was trying to figure out how I could see this in some way, but they have changed a lot of their web pages, apparently, to not be HTML, but instead to be Markdown, which I hope you are familiar with by this point, but it's basically text files with some extra characters like asterisks or underscores that are used to indicate emphasis in some form, or dashes for bullet lists, etc., which then get converted into web pages that we see. But Markdown files are also the format used by AI LLMs. So Time has been trying to see if it can feed more of its content to LLMs by having them get Markdown rather than HTML. But on July 30th, it was reported that Time was actually starting to serve ads to AI agents. They had a couple of clients who bought ads, which Time was then inserting into the Markdown files that it was feeding to the AI LLMs. I guess seeking to influence the outcomes of what the AI LLMs would go and provide. But news recently on August 11th was that Perplexity was blocking those ads that Time served to agents, calling them deceptive, as the article mentions. But what Perplexity is trying to do is to block that. They feel it is deceptive to put ads interwoven into the content which is being fed to LLMs. Now, I honestly don't know how much of this is actually real in some form, because the fact is that if a LLM was getting a web page just in regular HTML, there would be ads there that the AI LLM would need to go and remove in some way. However, this is all part of this evolution that web pages are no longer providing the direct connection that they used to, where you could put ads, etc., in some form. Now, speaking of AI systems, etc., LinkedIn got some attention back on July 30th when they announced that they had added a button to report AI-generated slop. It was actually, it's not in the web version, but in the mobile version, when you go and use the app, you could click little buttons next to the story and you would get choices like send it or connect or report a comment. You also had a button that said seems like AI slop, which would go and report that into LinkedIn. Well, in a story on August 21st in Engadget, LinkedIn had said that its slop button is working. And apparently there was some drop in as much as, it says here, members are now experiencing 40% less views on what we classify as AI slop from just a few weeks ago. So, don't know what that means exactly, but what that does mean is that people are trying to differentiate and trying to get rid of some of the slop, the AI-generated text that is not necessarily great to read. So we'll see what happens with signals like this. Are they useful? Are they doing it? Overall, the way we experience content, the way we view content is changing, and we're all trying to figure this out. But that's all I've got for you now. I'm going to get some sleep before I head back home to Vermont tomorrow, and I hope all of you have an awesome day today. Bye for now.
Well, thanks, Dan. Yeah, I've been reading all about the LinkedIn option now. It's a little pull-down menu from the three dots that you can signal that you think that something is AI slop. I haven't used it. The only thing I use there on a regular basis is not interested, as LinkedIn seems to be populated more and more by partisan political posts that have absolutely no connection to business whatsoever. I don't mind a political post on either side of the aisle, as long as there's a connection to business, because that's what LinkedIn is for. But if it's just a blatant partisan attack, I don't, and I do this with people who are posting positions I agree with. I am on LinkedIn for the business connections, for the business thought leadership, for the business reporting. And if there's no connection at all, I'm not interested. And I find that I'm able to adjust my feed. The more I click that, the less of that type of thing I see. And LinkedIn goes back to being what I joined it for in the first place. But I have not yet clicked the one that allows you to identify this as AI slop. Have you done that yet?
No, I've not actually encountered anything that made me search for something to report it at all. I tend to ignore all of this stuff, Sean, to be frank. I rarely proactively do anything on it. If I get a pop-up saying, do you like this? Sometimes I might. Particularly, there's one thing I do is report stuff. Please block this. I've seen this too often. And I ask me a reason why. Often it's just not of interest to me, or I see it too often. And I always get, fine, we've taken it off, won't appear in your feed anymore. Great. I should do that more often now that I think about it. But, it's fine. And I see, as Dan mentioned, in one of the, I think it's TechCrunch he refers to, reporting that this seems to be working. Now, I've not looked into any more detail about how do they know it's working, but I mean, great. If it is, it's good. But I think it's so arbitrary, isn't it? I mean, button, this is AI slop. I mean, that is so generic.
Yeah, I saw M dashes. It must be AI slop.
Amazing.
All right. On Tuesday this past week, Meta went to trial in Oakland, facing a coalition of 29 state attorneys general. This is being led by the attorneys general from my state. This is Rob Bonta, the attorney general from California, also Colorado, Kentucky, and New Jersey. These are the lead plaintiffs. They're claiming that Facebook and Instagram were deliberately designed to hook kids and that Meta knew it and hid it. Meta itself told the court the penalty calculation could run as high as $1.4 trillion if they are found liable for everything that they're being accused of. Mark Zuckerberg is expected to testify. I'm sure that'll go extremely well. So is Instagram's Adam Mosseri. The dollar figure is mind-boggling. I mean, imagine if Meta had to actually wind up paying over $1 trillion. I mean, what would that do to the organization's future, its finances? But there's a lot more at stake here than the existential threat to Meta. This isn't a personal injury case. It's a consumer protection case, which means the states aren't just asking for money. They're asking the judge to order Meta to actually rip features out of the product. We're talking about infinite scroll, video autoplay, disappearing stories, beauty filters, algorithmic feeds for minors. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. A Los Angeles jury already found Meta and Google negligent in a similar case back in March. They awarded $6 million in damages. And California's Attorney General said flatly that Meta is just first in line. YouTube and Snap are already facing their own lawsuits. So what do people who study this think will actually change? Well, Kate Winnick, a principal analyst at Forrester, called this potentially the end of social media as we know it, and drew the comparison a lot of people are drawing to the big tobacco settlements of the 90s. Her prediction isn't that social media will disappear. It's that the product gets harder for young people to access and the cultural conversation around it shifts the way it did with cigarettes. She also expects competitors like Snap to make preemptive changes rather than wait to be sued themselves. Analysts covering the advertising side of this are already sounding a warning. A Storyboard 18 analysis this week made the point that engagement has always been the currency of social advertising. More time in-app means more advertising inventory, more data, more monetizable moments. If courts start forcing platforms to strip out the very features that maximize engagement, that inventory shrinks, particularly for younger audiences. Design Rush put it even more bluntly for marketers. Platform risk is becoming brand risk, and agencies need to start factoring regulatory exposure into media planning the same way they'd factor in a supply chain risk. So practically, what should you be doing right now if social is a centerpiece of your strategy? Well, stress test your channel mix before you're forced to. Don't wait for a verdict to ask what happens to your plan if Instagram stories or infinite scroll simply isn't there anymore. Start modeling these things now. You also should be shifting your measurements of success. The engagement as currency model, time spent, scroll depth, session length, is exactly what's on trial. Start building your reporting around qualified reach, completed views, and actual brand lift, not raw time on platform, so your metrics don't collapse the moment the underlying mechanics change. Also, if your brand targets younger audiences at all, start scenario planning for tighter age verification and access restrictions now, rather than reacting when a court order lands. This isn't hypothetical. It's exactly what the states are asking for. And fourth, and here's the one that I think is particularly comms specific, not just marketing specific, get ahead of your own internal conversation about platform dependency. If your organizations quietly let one platform become the backbone of both your marketing and your external communications, the trial is your prompt to ask leadership, what's our plan B? And are we building it now, or are we just waiting for the verdict to force our hand? Obviously, we don't know how this trial ends. It just started. It's expected to go on, I think, 6 weeks is what I heard. But the lawyers, the analysts, and Meta's own court filings all agree on one thing. Whichever way it goes, it's a signal event for the whole industry, not just for Meta.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree. It's got a lot of attention over here too. And I think that's partly, more primarily, it's because it's Meta. And it's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, the whole parade of apps behind it that everyone uses in one way or another. So the speculation, oh my God, is this the end of Instagram? I see people talking about that. But I add a dose of cynicism to some of this show, to be honest, in that we've been here before with threats of lawsuits. That's the end of this or whatever it might be. I can't imagine that Meta is going to go down the tubes with a $1 trillion financial penalty. I just couldn't see it happening. Look at what happened with Cambridge Analytica back in 2018. I mean, that was a scandal beyond the pale. Nothing really happened to them. I mean, it was business as usual, and they repeated some of the bad things that they did, not long ago even. So it needs something a lot more existential threat-like than a $1 trillion fine. Petty cash. It's not even, it's only 25% of the U.S. national debt under Trump, so it's not a big deal, really, So it's nevertheless, it is serious without doubt. And one good thing of it is drawing attention to some of the things that, Meta are now talking about we're going to do something about. Here in Europe and specifically in the UK, there's a lot of talk. It's constant, although it's died down in intensity in recent weeks, about the damage to young people, particularly pre-teens who are active on these platforms. And I saw a news story the other day that OpenAI is rolling out a version of its chatbot called ChatGPT for teens, for users under 18, that they say has stronger built-in safety protections. I mean, I don't know what message they're trying to get out here, but why haven't you done this before then? With stronger built-in safety protections? Why isn't that in place for everyone doing this? So I think from a comms point of view, Meta and everyone else who are suddenly scrambling to make announcements what they do, be wary of talking about that we're doing this dedicated thing to address, concerns about safety protections, all that kind of stuff, because that's what you've been resisting for decades. And certainly don't now try and play the good guy. You're not the good guy. This lawsuit demonstrates that quite clearly. And I think it's interesting to observe what happens. That could this spread out into something mega, I mean, truly mega. In parallel, I see other interesting things going on. I saw a story just the other day saying that in the midst of all this, it's rumored that MySpace is about to make a comeback.
I saw that.
Now, if they are looking to do something like they did back in the day, that might appeal now, actually. I've still got a MySpace account, by the way. I haven't visited it in a long time. But so this is kind of in the midst of one of the reasons I think why it's getting attention, in the midst of society level concerns that we're seeing manifesting itself in some of the opinions pressure groups have here in the UK, certainly, often run by women who you can't truly, genuinely argue against what they're saying, although some of them are arguing against it. There's no proof. Where's the evidence? It doesn't match our data, all that kind of stuff. And I think it will need a groundswell, I think, of public opinion to be behind some of the criticisms. Again, cynicism kicks in here because we've seen this before and nothing really happens. So I'm not sure whether this will make any difference, again, depending on what happens. And as you say, this is only just kicked off. So I did see, because one of the news channels here, Sky News, covered the opening of the trial outside the courthouse in, where is it, in LA or somewhere in California, is it?
Yeah, I think it's up here. I think it's in Oakland.
Yeah, San Francisco? Oh, okay. So, and it showed, there's a picture of the courthouse. It had all these rosettes, red, white, and blue, hanging off the balconies. And it gave the razzmatazz show that's very American. You wouldn't see that happening over here. But all these women talking about, and strong opinions, and they were credible in some of the things they were saying. It wasn't, misery being on display here. These were people who had strong opinions. They can see an opportunity to highlight their case, and I think they'll get attention if they do it the right way. So add that to the mix. Other than that, we don't really know much more because it's only just starting. So, but it will be definitely an interesting story to keep an eye on.
Yeah, even if the court finds 100% for the plaintiffs in this case and 100% against Meta, they'll appeal. And the appeal will take a couple of years, and then that can be appealed. And how many times can you appeal? This will be years before there's a resolution. But yeah. I can see, when all of this plays out, that the change to social media could be substantial. And it's the analogy to tobacco that I think makes me feel that way, because it took forever to change attitudes about tobacco, but it is not socially acceptable now after piecemeal laws. I mean, it was first you can't smoke in bars and restaurants, and people were up in arms about that. And but you take that for granted now. You get rid of the advertising that's aimed at kids. Joe Camel, for example, you get rid of the cartoons, the cool camels smoking an unfiltered cigarette, and you've really shifted societal attitudes about tobacco. And I could see the same thing happening over the long term with the same type of approach taken. So if it starts with not letting kids take advantage of the features in the social networks that they like, just removing those, making it harder for them to access some of this stuff, or just removing it from the platform altogether, then those platforms become less desirable. The kids aren't there. Who's left? Us. How appealing are we to marketers as a target? And everything sort of snowballs from there. So over the long term, I can see this having an implication. Do I think in 6 weeks there's going to be a finding and suddenly social media as we know it is gone? No, I think that's absurd. But I do agree with you. Meta's not the good guy in this case. I think in the previous cases that have been tried, and there was the one in California earlier, there was also a bigger one. I think it was in Arizona or New Mexico or Colorado, where it was literally hundreds of millions of dollars that they had to pay. That the discovery found emails that supported the case, that they knew that this is what they were doing. They did it deliberately, and they didn't care that they were addicting kids to these platforms. And I assume that same evidence is going to be introduced in the current trial. So I'd be surprised if this one suddenly and miraculously goes Meta's way. So I think this could be the start of some significant changes to the way social media is offered to people, and the kind of influences that it will have. And by the way, could be excellent timing for MySpace's return to come and say, hey, we're back. We're the social media that always took safety seriously.
Exactly.
And if what you have been hearing about Facebook troubles you, rejoin us and come visit MySpace Island in Second Life too, So.
It's funny. I was watching about a month or so back now, a video I've got. You've seen this, I know. Thank You for Smoking.
Mm-hmm.
About the lobbying industry of tobacco, booze, and I've forgotten the other one, firearms. It got me thinking, and mentioned it popped into my mind again as we were discussing this, that I've seen recently here in the UK editorial articles, or maybe placed media, I haven't paid too close attention to it, about the upcoming likelihood that the only tobacco product doesn't carry any health warnings on them at all is cigars. And that's about to change. And these ugly announcements about cigar smoking will kill you, stop smoking now, all that in black letters on a white background that obscure the packaging. The interesting argument I'm seeing, though, is that it's arguing about this is such a shame because some of the designs on cigar packaging is iconic from a century ago. We're going to lose all this, and this is bad. I see a lobby event happening here. And I wonder what they're going to crank up in Meta's defense, specifically relating to social media, how they're going to address this. But be sure this is going to crank up.
Yeah, when I was a kid, we all kept our little memorabilia in cigar boxes, and and they're gorgeous. The designs are spectacular.
Beautiful.
And I don't know where I got them from because my dad did not smoke cigars. He was a cigarette man. Lucky Strikes, I remember that very, very well. But we all had cigar boxes, and that's where we kept our little collectibles.
Yeah, as you do.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting story, though, Cheryl. Nevertheless, I think it's only just starting, as you point out. The trial is just getting underway, and revelations are going to emerge, and see how it develops. So I've got an interesting one here. That the title of it, well, what can I say? I mean, as I wrote about it on LinkedIn, it's an AI story that stopped me in my tracks. That's the only way to describe it. When I came across it just a few days ago, and I want to put an important caveat around it before I introduce the topic. So it originated in a post on X. I haven't been able to independently verify that every detail happened exactly as described. It may be entirely literal. It may be embellished or it may be partly be intended as a cautionary tale. But the organizational behavior it describes is absolutely worth talking about. The author of the tweet says he joined a meeting with his company's talent acquisition team to discuss their new AI-driven resume screening system, and apparently it was working brilliantly. The team reported that the software had reduced time to hire by 60% in a month. Think about that as a management KPI for a moment, 60%. If you're sitting in the executive suite looking at a dashboard, that's the sort of number that gets people's attention. The technology investment is working. Productivity is up. Hiring is faster. Great result. Except the author asked another question. What exactly had they told the AI to optimize for? The answer was digital natives with high runway potential and a youthful energy. So he asked them to look at the demographics of the candidates the system had rejected. According to his account, it had rejected 100% of applicants who had graduated from university before 2010. Suddenly, that spectacular 60% productivity improvement looks rather different. But there's a line later in the story that I think is even more revealing. When the potential discrimination problem was pointed out, because that's really what you're talking about, age discrimination, the HR manager apparently argued that the AI made the decision, not her. So the company was insulated from liability. We've delegated the decision, therefore we've delegated the responsibility. And that to me is one of the most dangerous misconceptions organizations can have about AI. And if this example is typical, this is not uncommon. I bet you that is the case. It's really dreadful. You can delegate a task to an AI system. We've talked about this on the show before, Shell. You can automate a process. You can allow an algorithm to make recommendations or even decisions, but you cannot automate away accountability. There's another aspect of this that I think should concern communicators in particular. Look at the language supposedly used to instruct the AI system. Digital natives, high runway potential, youthful energy. Those are exactly the kinds of expressions that can float around organizations sounding like harmless jargon or management shorthand. Put them into an AI system, making consequential decisions about real people, though, and suddenly language isn't just describing organizational culture, it's operationalizing it. The machine is turning the euphemism into a decision rule. And there's something else here that connects to a much wider problem we're starting to see with AI adoption. When an AI system produces an unexpectedly good result, our instinct is to celebrate it. Perhaps our instinct should sometimes be to investigate it. If productivity jumped 60%, what happened? What trade-offs produced that number? Who benefited? Who didn't? What did the system learn to optimize away? Because automation doesn't necessarily eliminate discrimination, bad judgment, or flawed organizational assumptions. It makes them scalable. And here's a final comment from the tweet author. I'm currently drafting a memo to halt all hiring until we manually review 4,000 resumes, those ones that the system had rejected. So here's the question I'd put on the table, Shell. If an AI system delivers a spectacular improvement in a business KPI, whose job is it to ask what the system had to do to achieve it?
Well, I think that needs to be baked into the governance, doesn't it? We're right back to that governance model and the policies. I mean, we've talked about this recently. I mean, my productivity could absolutely skyrocket because I delegated a report, let's say, to AI. I gave it a thin prompt. It gave me this highly polished 5-page report. I give it a quick once over and I send it along, and I'm now able to take the time that I would have spent researching and writing that report, doing other high value things for the organization, and the organization can now tout that we've had this productivity gain. Meanwhile, the department that I sent that report to is looking at this and going, wait a minute, this reads real well, but there's no substance here. I need to validate whether there are things that are accurate here. So what happened, I merely shifted the work to the department that received my output rather than me creating a useful, well-researched, well-written document. So, the first thing I want to question is, how are they measuring productivity? The second question is, what are these people doing with their time now that they have saved that time? by using AI? Is it just more, mundane rote work doing, more AI agent management? Or are they actually, we talk about where I work, and I'm on the AI committee. We just wrapped up an AI survey of our entire employee population. And what we have found is that out in the field on the actual construction projects, the people who are saving time with AI are, one, spending more time with the client, engaging with the owners, building that relationship, building the trust, and they're spending more time out on the project, walking the project, doing safety walks, doing project walks, talking to the subcontractors. This is high value stuff that an AI can't do. So we were really happy to see that in our survey results. We can say, okay, what they're spending that saved time doing is high value strategic stuff that matters to the organization. So yeah, I think, what are you measuring and how are you measuring it? It needs to be part of this conversation.
Okay, yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think, though, what concerns me about this is the fact that you had an employee involved in the recruitment process who, with a straight face, argued that AI made the decision, not me. So, hey, what can I do? And the author of the tweet did the right thing, I think, which is investigate the rejects to see, what clues can he as to why they were rejected. Yet he knows the answer because the prompt they were given was, those high runway potential digital natives, youthful energy. And so that's what it worked on. And I think what I find strange, if this is a true story, and I have no reason to doubt it's not, even though only this tweet that you have to go on. No one asked, and again, I can't say more than that because I don't know what the structure is of this organization, where the kind of curiosity was that would have produced things like, what happened? If this productivity jump, this is extraordinary. What trade-offs produced that? Who benefited? Who didn't? What did the system learn to optimize away? They didn't have anything to guide them on that by the looks of it. So this comes back precisely to the point you made. This is a governance issue. There's things they should have in place that clearly are not. If this guy hadn't accidentally encountered this, I mean, I shudder to think if he hadn't had that conversation with that talent acquisition person in his team, this would have remained undiscovered and they would have blissfully gone about, wow, this is fantastic, this productivity gain. And yet there's something fundamentally flawed, it seems, that you give this kind of prompt, you get the behavior we understand that it did to reject all these other applicants and produce the outcome that it gave. No one questioned anything, it seemed to me. So there you got a problem at the high level in the organization. And this is a pattern we see in many of the stories we're reporting, Shell, over the past few months, where you look at the story that developed that led us to talk about it. You think there's something missing here at a management level in the organization that shouldn't be missing. And we've had the obvious one about the human in the loop. But this goes deeper than that. This is fundamental, and this is worrying.
It is. And I mean, we could spend a whole show talking about talent acquisition and AI being used to screen resumes and the like, which is problematic in its own right. I mean, what do most organizations using the AI to find? It's the candidates who have the appropriate degree from the right university, that they've got the right keywords in their CV. They have the appropriate technical skills. None of these things are predictors of success in the organization, in life. I'm reading a book right now. By the way, highly, highly recommend this book. It's having a profound impact on my thinking. It's called Robot Proof by Vivian Ming. She's a fascinating character, but this book is extraordinary in the approach that it takes to ensuring that humanity remains relevant and thrives when AI is there, handling all of these routine tasks that humans are no longer required to perform. So she points out through her work in recruiting and in education. The predictors of success are things like social intelligence, perspective taking, communication and collaboration, the ability to solve novel problems, comfort with uncertainty, and deeply human capacities that increase in value as AI gets smarter. These are things that are predictors of success and wealth and happiness, and the ability to be creative and innovative on behalf of an organization. And we're not looking for those things. So, I mean, these are all conversations that I think we need to be having out there is, just an AI that is faster at looking for the wrong things that recruiters have been looking for decades and decades. That's not the approach we need to be taking. We need to be rethinking all of this based on the data that's available to us.
Yeah.
And that's what Vivian Ming has and shares in this book is the data that she has processed through machine learning tools since long before there was a ChatGPT. Highly recommend this book. And by the way, the book also has the best footnotes I have ever read.
There's also makes you think of, the HR person saying that the AI made the decision, not me, of something.
You made a decision to use the AI, right?
Well, back in February and April, in fact, Sylvia Canby and I ran a couple of workshops for IBC on ethics in AI. And we gave some case study examples. And one of them is very relevant to this conversation. This is the example of Workday that is involved in a lawsuit where the plaintiffs who are suing Workday allege that AI systems used in talent acquisition resulted in discriminatory outcomes. The concern isn't simply bias in one decision, it's systemic exclusion embedded in the design of it, how ranking, filtering, and screening models operate at scale. So what happened, just as one little example, is that someone who was studying all this that came up with the details discovered that there are examples where someone applied for a job and within literally a minute, they got a reject email. And there are examples where the reject emails are sent at 2 a.m. in their time zone. That lawsuit is still going on. It's raised questions about oversight, fairness, transparency, and even vendor liability. So it's certainly relevant to this story if you've got someone arguing that the AI made the decision. But it's discriminatory, and arguably, from what we know, the human was behind it, yet the AI made that decision. That's not really what happened, but that's how it appears. So this is quite serious, and the Workday one, I think, is even more serious, the way it seems to be playing out. But nevertheless, these indicate, again, as I mentioned earlier, that we've got examples in organizations where things aren't working right. Things aren't being done well. And you kind of wonder what else is going to emerge that we didn't know about until someone discovered it. So these are things from a leadership point of view that we need to pay attention to be proactive in setting in place the ground rules for this. So it's not about guidelines or any of that kind of thing. It is about the fundamentals of AI leadership.
Yeah. And, at the end of the day, we're probably not getting the best candidates in the door at the same time, which ultimately that's what we want. And the way these things are working right now, they're creating problems and probably leaving us with less than optimum new hires. Well, retail has a new marketing playbook, and brands are turning their own employees into influencers. Gap is the clearest example. In January, it opened its year-old creator program. It had previously been reserved for outside influencers with at least 1,000 followers. They've opened it up to its own corporate distribution and store staff. Employees can now earn commission and free product for posting about Old Navy, Gap, Athleta, and Banana Republic. Those are the Gap brands. Gap says the original program had already reached 154 million people across nearly 30,000 posts. David's Bridal did something similar. They launched David's Style Squad. These are store associates earning the same 5 to 15% commission as outside creators, with top performers up to 20%. A progress update from Modern Retail in April said the program had grown past 250 active ambassadors with roughly 500 applications. Starbucks has gone even further still, building the Green Apron Creators program from scratch and piloting a custom TikTok tool to share ad revenue with baristas. And Staples got here almost by accident. A store associate who went viral talking about their printing services became such an asset that the company leaned into it rather than shutting it down. And you may remember that we talked several years ago about a guy who worked for a paint company who was doing, I think it was either Instagram or TikTok videos, and they fired him for doing that, even though he was a hardcore brand ambassador who was getting people to buy the product, and he ended up getting hired by a competitor. Go figure. But why are brands suddenly taking this position of inviting their employees to become creators? Why now? And the answer is trust. Audiences are tuning out anything that smells like an ad, and the most credible person a brand has is someone who already works there. We've told you this for years and years, that your employees are your most credible spokespeople, and that it comes out in the Edelman Trust Barometer too. Employees also come cheaper than an outside creator roster, and the content has a built-in supply chain. A barista or a store associate can film something in 10 minutes with product that's already just sitting there on the shelf. But the people covering this are flagging real problems. Digiday's reporting this month points out that you can't just flip a switch. There's no consistent model for whether content happens on the clock or off the clock, or what happens when a store manager needs someone running the register instead of chasing down that viral shot. One marketing exec told Digiday most employee content is unusable, and finding the ones who are actually good at it is like panning for diamonds. There's precedent for how badly this can go, too. Amazon's FC Ambassadors, which was launched in 2018 to put warehouse workers on social media during a labor conditions controversy, drew acquisitions of AstroTurfing and questions about whether some accounts were even real employees. Then there's the legal exposure. Employment attorney Mark Conkle said that the moment a company starts directing what employees post or ties compensation to participation, it's no longer enthusiasm, it's work. And every employment law that applies to work applies to that too. That includes the FLSA. Filming, editing, and monitoring comments at 9 at night can be compensable time, voluntary label or not. It includes overtime math if stipends or engagement bonuses aren't folded into the regular rate correctly. It includes discrimination risk if creators get picked because they look good on camera rather than by documented objective criteria. And it includes labor law. A creator policy that reads as "don't say anything negative" can legally chill employees' protected right to discuss wages and working conditions. So here's my advice, and it splits two ways depending on which hat you're wearing. If marketing is building one of these programs, your job is to get legal, HR, and marketing in the same room before it launches, not after the first viral post. Sort out compensation, selection criteria, and IP ownership up front. If you're the one being asked to sell this internally, be honest with employees about what they're actually signing up for. Real hours, real tax and wage implications, and a real trade-off between building the brand's audience and building their own. And if marketing pitches you a program without any of that groundwork done, that's the time to push back loudly before it launches, not after that first lawsuit.
Yeah, quite interesting, isn't it, Shell? This is, as you said, we've talked about this before some time ago, and that example of the paint company is interesting. I think attitudes, strategies, and so forth will have changed quite a bit since then. I think the paint company was Sherwin-Williams, if I'm not wrong.
I think so.
Yeah.
Although that may have been the one he ended up going to. I could look it up. I don't remember.
Could be. Yeah, could be. Reading the story in one of the links you shared in Retail Dive that talks about Gap and David's Bridal, it's actually quite interesting. This is not a kind of an aside, like a little side project. This is a significant aspect to their brand management and general marketing, where employees are part of the process that rewards them for their actions. It makes sense. I don't have any critiques on this at all. Even I can understand some concerns, certainly surrounding people saying we do authentic storytelling. You can say that, but you need to convince people that is the case, authentic storytelling. I think there's a difference between people with passion who happen to be employees of your company talking about your brands out in the marketplace, as opposed to people with passion or employees you're now going to pay to do this. That's kind of losing something in the picture, it seems to me. So there's a fine line to walk, I think, in how you communicate authentic storytelling. Because is it authentic because you're paying them? Because weren't they doing this before and now they're being rewarded? So I'm not saying that that's not a good thing. You need to be clear in how this is perceived.
Yeah, sure. This is not an employee advocacy program.
No.
To be clear, this is not an opportunity for employees to share content and to put their own spin on it in their networks. Employee advocacy programs have been around a long time. They can be very effective. We have one. We use one of the tools that's available out there to manage it. But nobody gets paid for these. I mean, some of them, you have leaderboards and you may have campaigns with prizes for who's on top of the leaderboard each week during the campaign. That's not the same thing. The creator programs that we're talking about grew out of the whole influencer movement where these people get paid to promote the product. And basically what they're doing is saying, hey, we're going to give our employees the same opportunity we're giving the creator community out there. And it just doesn't shake out that way because of employment law and because of everything else that I mentioned. And by the way, that was Tony Pilicino. He was an Ohio College student and a Sherwin-Williams employee, so good memory. He built a huge TikTok following, posting paint mixing videos using Sherwin-Williams products. And in 2020, they fired him, citing misuse of company materials and creating content on company time. And he was hired by Florida Paints, which embraced his social media creativity and gave him a role producing content for the brand. So that was that story.
Sherwin-Williams loss, without question. Yeah. They missed the point entirely. But to be fair, that was back then, and that was probably a common view. You're wasting time on our dime, and we're going to fire you. But, I was reading the retail dive piece, as I mentioned, on Gap as well. And interestingly, the VP of marketing, his comments about why they're doing this. Our employees know our brands, our products, and customers better than anyone. Well, absolutely. By expanding the program to eligible employees across our offices, we're giving them a way to become influencers, earning commission and product while sharing what they love and bringing our brands to life through authentic storytelling. That doesn't gel with me at all, that description, I have to say. It's forced. This is a marketing activity, basically. So the word authentic doesn't work well there, I think. Anyway, they had some success, without doubt. They talk about the program has now reached nearly 154 million consumers across 30,000 posts, according to the press release that the Gap issued. I mean, that's no small beer, without doubt. So it's a good result. So I guess the answer is, for me, I want to take a look at this, say, in 6 months' time to see what it's looking like.
Yeah, but in the meantime, I think the advice stands. There are labor, legal, and HR implications in doing this. And if you just let marketing launch it without having looked into that and addressed it and invited HR, legal, and any labor relations specialists into the room, I don't know, could have just been marketing. God knows we've seen plenty of examples of that. Where marketing releases something to the wild, right? Like snatch up these bargains faster than a gator can snatch up a child.
Extreme example. That was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's
stuck in my mind.
Good seeing. Yeah, it's good seeing all this, I have to say. And as long as they're doing it in a way that isn't going to bite back at them, as it were, all to the good. But need to see more evidence of success and that word authentic being used properly.
Yeah, I'd be very interested if any listeners work for organizations or have clients that have embarked on this kind of a program. I'd love to know what kind of safeguards were applied to that, what kind of conversations were held with HR and legal, and how it's going. So let us know. So our next monthly episode of FIR, our long-form monthly episode for September, will drop on September 28th, Monday, September 28th, which means Neville, you and I will record it on Saturday, September 26th. We will be here with our short form midweek episodes beginning not this Monday, but next Monday in between those monthly episodes. So we hope that you will all watch for those announcements and or just subscribe to the podcast, and they'll show up in your podcast player. And until we see you on our next episode, that will be a 30 for immediate release.